welcome back. I wanted to jump on here and talk about the astrology that's currently going on. We've got Venus in Cancer, culminating into Jupiter, and it recently squared Saturn. That's out of orb now, but I would imagine that we have felt that. I know I have. Um, Wanting us to have the courage to take responsibility for, how we are relating with ourselves and what makes us feel safe, how that makes us feel safe. And with Venus culminating into Jupiter, I think that we have some underlying beliefs that we felt used to keep us safe. But as we start to move into it, it's starting to take a different turn. And if we can turn towards that to really understand our needs and, how we feel somatically, then, we can kind of reevaluate some of these beliefs and whether or not they're still serving us. And I think that's a lot of what's going on. Venus is going to make a conjunction to Jupiter on June 9th, coming right up. And then it'll go new phase as Jupiter is, pretty quickly headed towards Leo. It's still a little ways away from it, but as the sun creeps closer to it, Jupiter speeds up from our perspective. The speed is constant, but from our perspective, astrology is a geocentric art. It's the art of observing from Earth. And so as the sun comes around, these planets move faster. And as as Jupiter moves into Leo at the end of the month, it's going to square uh, Chiron, and Chiron will be freshly into Taurus, and we're going to get a taste of what Chiron and Taurus is about. Chiron is going to move into Taurus and then back up into Aries, but right now it's culminating its journey through Aries. And I think that that's a lot about uh, some of the examining some of the wounds, having the courage to face and examine, things that come up about maybe what we've been attached to that we've identified with that are no longer serving us. And so I think that Jupiter ties into this really well because Jupiter is about beliefs, it's about truth, and it's about, wisdom and understanding. And I think with Mercury moving into Cancer, where it's going to be, this will be the second retrograde cycle in water signs. The first one was in Pisces, and it entered Pisces, went up and stationed retrograde, backed up, stationed direct in Pisces, and then finally moved out and moved on. And I think we've been integrating the messages that come through. Mercury is the psychopump that can move and bring messages through from the underworld, from our subconscious into our conscious mind. And especially the one that went through Pisces, it can come through symbolically and in different ways that may not initially make a lot of sense. And so it can take a long time for us to really integrate what came up through there. Uh, uh, I really like to bring James Hillman into this, and he would say, don't try to define these symbols that come forward in this. They're not meant to be defined because as soon as we decide this is what it means, the life drops out of that symbol. And it's a way of relating to the symbolic mindset that really brings it to life. And it's really been changing the perspective, the way that I've related to this kind of stuff over the past few months. I always say on this channel, you know, this is how I see it right now. This may change, and this is one of the things that has been changing for me. Is I think that more often things are meant to be looked at and turned. Like I picture it like this: if you hold a stone in your hand and you keep turning it and seeing it from a different perspective, and eventually you reach a point where you don't see it from the same eyes that you saw it from before, and it changes your relationship to it. The stone itself didn't change, you yourself didn't change, but the way that you interact with and understand something changes. And so I really want people to try and work through that kind of a perspective. Um, with Venus culminating into Jupiter right now in Cancer, I think a lot of this is about, you know, what does it take for me to feel safe to embody my emotional truth? Cancer is a lot about the root of who we are. And I picture a tree or a plant that has this really deep taproot that brings the nourishment up into the leaves and into the trunk and into, you know, your yourself, your psyche. And so how do we how we take in nourishment, um, how we nourish ourselves, both mentally and physically, all have a big factor in this. But as Jupiter moves through this last bit of Cancer, it's been there for almost a year, and at the end of this month, it's going to move into Leo, and that's going to change the way that things are. If we gain the truth and the wisdom to understand that we can occupy our emotional truth, that we're safe to be this way, then what can we create? What can we do with this newfound wisdom? And I think that's, you know, that's a topic for a different video. I want to focus more on the Mercury coming into Cancer, and now it's going to be there for a while. And let's see, I want to look at my notes here. Mercury uh, squared Neptune as it entered Cancer. Let's put up the chart and let's take a look here. Sorry about the delay there. Um, yeah, so Mercury squared Neptune as it came in to Cancer. It's beyond that now, but as it moves through the square, it goes from a crescent square, a crescent phase square, and then into a first quarter square. It's not going to come back into this square, but I think that this is more about, you know, dissolving some of the things that we've identified with that have been creating an illusion that have kept us from our truth. And, you know, wow, like all this language that talks about all this. One of the things that came up for me was I started to realize uh, something about a relationship that I've had for a long time that hasn't been serving me. I feel like I've kind of been growing beyond this, and it it it's got a lot of different things happening for me. I'm getting both signals. Um, Oftentimes, what is comfortable is not necessarily what will promote our growth and not where we're meant to be. And that comfort can jade us or keep us blinded to, if we refuse to move beyond the comfort and challenge it, then I think we can get it's easy to stay stuck in the ruts of the road. And in a prior video, I talked about, creating new neural pathways is like driving a truck down a road that has ruts in it. And if you've ever done that, it's hard to get that truck out of these deep ruts. But once you do and you're up into a new place, then it's easier to move forward and the likelihood of you getting stuck goes way down. And that's how the ruts tend to get wider on a well worn road. Well, our brain and our neural pathways are often very similar. And if you've got a personality that has CPTSD, complex post traumatic stress syndrome, this is something where you don't have a big dramatic traumatic event that causes this, but it's seemingly non-event, non-circumstantial. That's not the right word, non-significant events, but it's a series of them that culminate or build up over time. And over time, these can really, the psyche can really back itself into a corner in the way that it reacts, what it believes about itself. I, I'm bouncing back and forth between uh, the generic you and myself because I've been experiencing a lot of this. And as I realized that I was outgrowing this relationship, my instinct or my tendency was to want to go back. And there's a lot of pain there because I realize and I know in my mind that it's not right, but at the same time, uh, I am grieving that relationship, and I'm looking at Ceres down here, which is squaring the nodes right now, and just went new phase to Uranus, and Sedna is there. Sedna is these frozen parts of ourselves that we have, that we replay in our minds over and over that once we can warm those up, and I think the sun moving through there and Ceres being there, we're getting these flashes of insight from, deeper parts of ourselves that are able to change our relationship to how we're showing up. And one of the things that I realized as I was going through this was that multiple things can be true at the same time. I can grieve the end of the relationship. I can be upset or angry that it has to be this way. I can be sad and frustrated that it isn't the same and it's not meeting my needs anymore. This is the Venus in Cancer. And I can also feel the comfort of the draw to go back and continue the way it is. But if I do that, I know that I won't be getting my needs met, my deeper needs. And Jupiter wants us to let go of something so that we can receive something. And as we culminate Jupiter's transit through um, Cancer, I think it's the time to bring the lessons in. I mean, we've been doing this for a while. Jupiter wants us to grow beyond these underlying beliefs that have been limiting our attachment. As it goes in to Leo at the end of the month, it's going to oppose Pluto, and it's going to, move through that pretty quickly because the sun is approaching it as well. But I think that that is going to show us and attract into our lives situations where we've grown beyond this comfort and we're moving to something new. And if we can stay with this, this is another beautiful archetype that I really love is uh, Mars is in a last quarter quintile with Jupiter right now. And a last quarter quintile is beautiful energy. It requires us or asks of us to, relate to the way that this conditioned reality that we've been living in, these beliefs that we've had about what keeps us safe and what keeps us comfortable. uh, Mars in Taurus is a really somatic uh, feeling. Like you can really feel it, and I can feel it as I think about my consciousness. When I'm scared, it all goes behind my head into to my amygdala. That's what I picture. And when I'm in my heart, it's open and flowing. It's like that that bubble. I can't remember the name of that energy, but it flows from the heart out and down underneath and back in, and it's expansive and huge. Well, if we can turn towards and have presence and feel that somatic safety to face and explore these beliefs that we've got, oftentimes it's not that we have to change our belief or let go or get rid of something. It's not about cutting it off. Hillman always talked about this is a very Western patriarchal psychological way of looking at things, is everything is a pathology that needs to be decided and solved. And when I talk about the turning of that stone, if we can keep turning these beliefs and looking at them from a different perspective, all of a sudden that last quarter quintile, we're going to get this soul level insight, this brilliance that comes through. And I think that also applies to Uranus here squaring the nodes, and the culmination or resolution node being the north node in Pisces, and how can we rest in the truth of who we are. But I think that it requires this brilliant insight that we can hold multiple truths. We can grieve who we've been and also open space to move forward in a new way. As you can tell, this is pretty tender stuff for me. Um, it's really been getting me in the heart. But I think that this was important. It felt like I can't be the only one that's going through this, and the insights that I've been learning through being able to hold multiple truths at the same time has been so helpful to allow space for my heart, to be opened in this way, and to understand, that growth can hurt. It's like that flower, a bud, on a plant that is flowering. It reaches a point where it's more painful to stay in a bud than it is to burst through and flower. And so I think that that's part of what we're experiencing. We're going to have a lot of time to talk about Mercury culminating into Jupiter as well. That will happen. I think it's at 10 degrees Leo, um, as it's moving out of this opposition with Pluto. And there's a lot to talk about here. The astrology right now is so beautiful. Uh, as we've set this up, we've got Pluto at 5 degrees retrograding back, Neptune at 4 degrees, Uranus is moving to 4 degrees, Jupiter will soon be at 4 degrees. And while this is happening at the end of the month, we've got the nodes that are preparing to move from Pisces. I don't think it's going to happen at the end of the month, but at the end of the month, it will be at 0 degrees. And that's the culmination. Remember, the nodes move backwards through the signs, so they start at the 30th or 29th degree and move backwards through it. So zero is the critical degree of a nodal transit through a sign. And while it does that, it's going to go new phase to Hecate right now. This is where we're at now. It's balsamic to Hecate. Hecate is, the goddess of thresholds, and I believe that's where we're at right now. We're at a real threshold moment where we are. She brings the torch so that you can see just enough to see where the next step is, the next step ahead. She was the goddess that heard Persephone's cries in the mythology of Persephone and Demeter, Persephone getting kidnapped into the underworld. And, that's, we'll save that story for another day. But Hecate is a beautiful archetype. It's about thresholds. It's about holding the light and being able to see. And then when we look at Vesta in between Saturn and Neptune, this is what this last few months has been about. And astrologers talked about this conjunction between Neptune and Saturn for a year or so, or even more before it happened. Neptune and Saturn going new phase at the 0 point Aries was a huge deal. And I think that dissolved a bunch of the structures of our identity. And now we're starting to rebuild these structures, but that rebuilding takes effort to break through, to build new neural pathways. We're combining the liminal, the spiritual side of things with the biological, the physical side of things. Like, I believe that we're here to embody ourselves. A lot of people talk about, well, I want to be enlightened, which a lot of spirituality, which I consider spiritual bypassing, is like, I'm going to meditate and so that I can, have these realizations that takes me out of my body and all of that, and I'll be enlightened. Well, I don't think that's true. I spent a lot of time trying to accomplish that. Not that others haven't done it. I don't know. But for me, I came to the conclusion that we are here to embody, and we are here to experience this as embodied people. Why else would we choose to incarnate as humans on this planet right now? Now I'm getting into, well, and let's just finish with Vesta. Vesta is about it's about a virgin mindset. It's about being unto yourself. It's a devotion to yourself, a devotion to your inner fire, your inner light, and being one unto yourself. That was a huge deal. The Vestal Virgins, if you ever get time, look up some of the mythology, and these were actual things that happened in Roman society and stuff. Um, but in between Neptune and Saturn, like, this is in Aries, especially, like all of this is super important right now about working through some of the wounding that has, that we've identified with that has kept us from feeling empowered. Like we've got, uh, we've got Pluto, which is trining Uranus and a sextile from Pluto to Neptune and from Uranus to Neptune as a backdrop. And this is going to go on for a while. These outer planets take a long time to move through. And if you've got any points in your chart that are making connections with these, it becomes even more important. Recently, over the last 4 years, I have my Mars is at 29 degrees of Capricorn, and Pluto has been dancing back and forth across it. Pluto moves very slowly, and it's been quite the transformation for me. And I highly recommend paying attention because when you can see it and you can lean into it and engage the relationship with this energy, it makes it easier. And that's what I feel astrology is for. Astrology is not to predict what's going to happen to me. I often used to joke about, I'm going to look at the astrology. I got to find out what's going to happen today. And it was a sarcastic joke to say, I want to look at where the energies are and, where maybe the opportunities to cooperate with the universe are. So if you guys are looking for a reading, we can take these transits and apply them to your chart and find out where this is happening in your chart. And I'm going to shut this down. I think that we've talked about this enough. We'll come back and we're going to talk more about this second Mercury retrograde cycle in the water trine. The third one will happen in Scorpio. This all kicked off back when we had Mercury went retrograde in Sagittarius and moved back into Scorpio. It was a partial retrograde, then the full retrograde cycle in Pisces, and now a full retrograde cycle in Cancer. And upcoming, there will be a full retrograde cycle in Scorpio. That's how Mercury works, and I think that we're really moving through. Trying to bring forward to light, some of these deeper emotional things that we weren't able to face or didn't have the emotional capacity to process at the time. And I think that that's where the work is right now is to expand our emotional intelligence, our emotional capacity. Look, that's Mercury in Cancer, emotional intelligence. If you're, if you have the words to describe things, if you have the ability to look at these things in with language, and it gives you more access to embody and feel these emotions. And so that's where, if one of the therapists I had one time said, emotions have a beginning and emotions have an end. And if you interrupt that by turning away from it in the middle of the process, it never finishes. But that doesn't go away. It needs to finish. We need to revisit it. We need to allow it to flow. We can change how we relate to an emotion because it can feel overwhelming and we can have a lot of fear behind it. We can have a lot of meaning and shame and guilt and under the way that we understand it. But if we can alter the way that we and sort through the earned guilt from the learned guilt. Sometimes earned guilt is not ours to hold. It's just something that was imprinted on us from our families and maybe even a culture that we grew up in or a culture that we work in, or just society in general. There's a lot of things that go on in the American culture and other cultures that aren't exactly healthy ways to look at things. And so it's important to sort through what is ours to hold and feel guilty about and what is not. And then there's the earned guilt side, and there's an art to being able to hold some earned guilt too, right? There are things that we've done that, we should feel guilty for. This all comes down to natural law. Jupiter, we're talking about Jupiter here. Natural law is, the things that naturally are ours to follow. I like to hold it like this. In nature, you can observe animals and things that act in ways that, like, our culture doesn't deem fit. Ducks are known to be homosexual, and other animals are known to hold those tendencies as well. Well, they don't look at it as anything. There's nothing wrong there. It's only when we bring our cultural values that are distorted from natural law that we can hold that shame and guilt for something that isn't really meant to be. So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. I think that this is beautiful energy. We'll come back on and talk about some of this other stuff, the Mercury retrograde, this new moon coming up, uh, Jupiter moving into Leo. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about, and I'm looking forward to doing it with you guys. And I appreciate you guys for being here. And may this be of service. I hope you find something of value in what I'm doing here, because it fills me up. So thank you.